Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Karam, board-certified facial plastic surgeon and founder and creator of Karam MD Skin. I specialize in facial rejuvenation, which basically means I help people look as young as they feel. And on today's episode of Skin School, we're going to talk about a very important and extremely timely conversation, especially as we get closer to summer, and that is, what are 5 common mistakes that people make with their melasma? Melasma is a huge topic. It's something that affects literally millions of people all over the country and throughout the world, and it can be frustrating and difficult to deal with, and there's a lot of misunderstandings and misconceptions around it. I've personally had a lot of my own experiences with it, as my wife has had melasma most of her adult life, and I've had tons of patients who've had it throughout their care with me, and I've learned a lot of lessons, and I'm going to turn those lessons into guidelines for you guys, and we're going to start with basically the root cause of melasma, and then we're going to talk about the 5 different common mistakes that people make. All right, guys, let's break it down. So number 1, let's figure out, in general, if you're wondering, what is causing melasma to happen in the first place? Now remember, melasma is different than hyperpigmentation coming from sun or aging. The difference is melasma is sort of like this confluence, almost like a large island of pigment that comes in patches, oftentimes generally symmetric between the 2 sides of the face. You can see it across the entire lip, you can see it on the cheeks, you can see it in the forehead. My wife's case, for example, she had it in this area around her upper lip that was consistently bothering her, as well as some in her forehead. I've seen it in a lot of different distributions throughout my career. Now, hyperpigmentation you see as like sunspots, little areas of darkening, scattered throughout the face from somebody who's spent a lot of time in the sun over the years, and as they get older, the sunspots become more prevalent. Melasma is a completely different beast, and it has a completely different underlying cause and a completely different treatment associated with it. So it's very, very important, guys, I cannot stress this enough, that if you have some pigmentation issues throughout your face, you need to understand whether you have melasma or whether you have just normal aging and sun-induced hyperpigmentation. I'm going to explain that when we get to mistake number 1 in a second. But generally speaking, what is the underlying cause? Now, the reality of the matter is no one really understands why melasma happens, but we do know that there are certain things that induce it or seem to be correlated with it. Number 1, people who are on birth control pills or hormone replacement therapy seem to be having a higher rate of melasma in their skin. I think that correlation cannot be, ignored. It is real. And I actually think that's probably a big reason my wife has had it, because ever since she's been on the birth control pill, she started to see this. And I see this again in a lot of younger people and people who are on hormone replacement therapy as they get a little bit older. So that has been a correlation. Other times it's just genetic. I mean, like everything else, right? If there's a genetic aspect to it, can't really explain it, we just chalk it up as genetic. There's also certain diseases, certain thyroid conditions and things like that, but then again, that kind of falls back into the overall hormonal type of stuff, and ultimately, no one quite understands in each individual case, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. Once it happens and once it's there, you need to know that you have it so you can inform yourself on what goes next. I'm going to, again, stress that very, very significantly. Now, the only one of the generally common causes of melasma that is reversible, as far as we know, really comes down to pregnancy. We see, the mask of pregnancy, as they describe, is that hyperpigmentation melasma mask that we see during pregnancy. As soon as the pregnancy is over, the hormones get back to normal. Usually that disappears. But, if you've got melasma induced by birth control pills or hormone replacement therapy, if you stop those things, that's going to help the melasma as well. So just know those aspects are reversible and inducible by these conditions. All right, so let me break it down. If you do have melasma, just know right off the top of your head, it's a tough condition. There's nothing easy about it other than potentially stopping the things that I just mentioned if you happen to have it from those, but the actual treatment of it is challenging. And we're going to talk about mistake number 1 now. And mistake number 1 when it comes to melasma is, I don't want to say falling for it, because I don't want it to sound malicious, but getting the impression that using office-based treatments things like chemical peels, lasers, microneedling, different fancy lasers and radiofrequency devices and all these other things that exist in medical spas and plastic surgery and dermatology practices, to have the impression that those things are actually going to cure melasma or even help it. Huge misconception and dead wrong. Now again, I've lived it. I've tried everything you could possibly imagine, both on my patients and on my wife. The net result is some of them, the majority of those things, actually make the melasma worse, believe it or not. What's fascinating about it is you can do some things to temporarily improve it, possibly break up some pigment, etc. But trust me when I say this, it literally comes right back. So it's most treatments is not worth the risk. Not worth the risk of either worsening the melasma or spending hard-earned and good money on something that's absolutely not gonna help it. But the fact of the matter is, in most cases, it actually worsens it. So have a hard conversation with your practitioner. I can tell you from, again, we've tried all different types of devices and we have them in our practices, in our offices, heard from patients and their own experiences, just don't work. We've given up on trying any of those things for melasma. All right, so that's mistake number one. Mistake number two. Now this one is a huge one. This one, in my opinion, is probably the most overlooked and underutilized one. And that is not going crazy on sun protection if you have melasma. There's probably no condition that is more closely tied to and affected by sun than melasma. I'm gonna give you a quick story on this. So we had a very close, dear friend of ours who had really, intense melasma throughout their face, in the 40s, somewhere in that range, late 30s, early 40s. And we decided we're gonna make it a mission to just go after this melasma and just not, so we tried all these different things. From topical agents, hydroquinone, regular peeling, different types of lasers. A close friend of mine, all stops taken out, just wanted to help her, get more clear looking skin, even tone in her skin. So we did it all. A year into treatment, she had a pretty significant improvement over baseline. Now mind you, she was doing a lot of things with sun protection, etc., in addition to these things. So some improvement had been seen along the way. One weekend, literally one weekend, she takes her kid to an amusement park. One weekend, she comes back on that Monday after spending 2 days blasted by the sun out in the amusement park. Her melasma was not only as bad, but probably worse than it was when she started. A year's worth of effort and energy made some improvement, but in one weekend, she shuttered the whole thing and we were back to square one. So the impact of sun, this has been studied, there's been tons of literature written about it. The sun impact is just massive and you cannot ignore it. If you have melasma and you want to take care of it, it behooves you to go crazy on sun protection. So what do I mean by that? All right, number one, use a very, very solid mineral-based sunscreen that has anywhere from 9 to 10% zinc or titanium oxide and above, has an SPF of 45, 50 and above, and you're using it regularly. That means, especially in the summer, you're putting it on in the morning before you leave the house, you're putting it on again in the afternoon, you're putting it on again late in the afternoon if you're going out and about, or if you're spending the whole weekend out in an amusement park or something like that. You're heavy-handed on the sun protection side of things with sunblock, but you're also extremely mindful of physical blockers like large hats, umbrellas, and believe it or not, probably, one of the least fashionable, one of the most hard to look at concepts, and that is the Coolie Bar facial mask. I hate to say it, doesn't look good, but it's UV protection and it covers all the key areas. Couple that with a hat and glasses and sunscreen and all that stuff. You're pretty solid if you're out. So if you don't really care, like my wife doesn't care at all what she looks like when she's just, walking or out with the kids or, doing all this kind of stuff. And she spends a lot of time in the sun. She does this every single day, rain or shine, it doesn't make a difference. She does it, religious about it. If you want to be seeing those improvements, trust me, this is really step one in your journey. You just have to make a commitment for it. Otherwise, you have to accept the melasma and just use, concealers and base foundation and all that kind of stuff to help even up the tone. But if you want to go makeup-less, like my wife doesn't like a lot of makeup, she doesn't like putting it on, she's got a tremendous amount of control over her melasma but by being principled on this one step. And I'm going to talk about the other components in a moment. Mistake number 3. All right, guys, this is, I'm kind of giving the big ones up front here, but the other two are extremely important as well. So here's what it comes down to. Most people who have melasma, who have general aging, hyperpigmentation, etc., all the normal stuff, are not using active daily ingredients such as retinol, vitamin C, etc. Now here's why these things are important. What is a pigment? A pigment is basically a melanin molecule that is born and created by the melanocyte, which is a cell that makes melanin. Now, melanin is upregulated, meaning more of it is made by exposure to sun or the conditions that cause melasma. So when the amount of melanin is produced, you're gonna get a pigment. And when a bunch of pigment is made, you're gonna get a confluence of it, and that leads to melasma. The more pigment, the darker it is, etc. Now, the name of the game is you have to get down to the level of the melanocyte, and you need to shut those melanocytes down. You need to stop producing melanin. So what does that mean? That means retinol or retinoids, which is retin A and retinol, do exactly that. They shut down the melanin production. Vitamin C shuts down melanin production. Hydroquinone shuts down melanin production, but I'm going to talk about hydroquinone in a moment, and it's going to be mistake number 4. And then there's a category of things that are considered non-hydroquinone lighteners, like things that are derived from plants and flowers. Daisy flower extract, licorice root extract. These, believe it or not, are components of botanical derived things that we see all around that actually, when put on the skin and get down to the level of the melanocyte, can shut down melanin production. That's where you want the action to be, because if you're not able to produce melanin, well, guess what? You can't make pigment, right? So it makes a ton of sense. Now, for example, when we developed the trifecta, I put this thing together and it took forever to actually formulate this, but when we did, I wanted to make sure pigmentation was addressed. I wasn't thinking melasma, because that's to me, it's like a whole nother animal. But what we found is in the people who use the trifecta, their basic pigmentation, whether it's from sun exposure, sun damage, or just aging, that gets reduced. But really, really exciting that people with melasma see a lightening of their melasma too. Now, this has probably been, I would say, the biggest turnaround for my wife, because she did all sorts of different things, like I said before, and ever since she'd been on the trifecta in combination with really good sun protection, her melasma has never looked better, as you can see by these photos. I mean, it's just really clear skin, and that is an important aspect of it. And I'll explain why these botanical-based ones are really important. Retinol and vitamin C are really important because you want them to be used at that cell level to shut things down and keep, no matter what hormonal effect or in the sun, you want those guys to do their job at that level. Now that leads us to the next mistake, all right? Mistake number 4. The most common treatment that you will find for people with melasma is the use of hydroquinone. Hydroquinone is a class of prescription cream that you put onto your skin that works at the level of the tyrosine kinase, which basically means that it's shutting down the production of melanin. Same thing as I mentioned with the retinols, vitamin C, and those botanical agents that I mentioned that are in the trifecta. But the problem is with hydroquinone, and when you're using it at 4% and above, which is generally speaking the effective amounts, yes, you're getting an impact on the skin. Yes, you're decreasing the production of melanin. Yes, you're going to start to see a reduction in the melasma, especially if you combine it with sun protection. However, if you use it for more than 6 months on average, it could even be as early as 4 to 5 months, but if you're using it in 6 months straight, there's a possibility and potential that your skin is gonna actually get inflamed or gonna have a response to it and actually get more pigmentation through an inflammatory hyperpigmentation condition that happens. Also, it's been found that people who stop cold turkey with hydroquinone can see their melasma actually worsen, like a rebound hyperpigmentation. Bottom line is it's not meant to be used on a regular basis. If it's not meant to be used on a regular basis, like meaning forever, and the condition and the underlying story is a forever story, I don't see a place for it. Honestly, I really don't see a place for it, because last thing you want to do is nail it with hydroquinone and then be in a situation where you have to wean off of it or whatever you got to do to kind of prevent that from happening, I'm not into that. I'm not into it because I don't want to take risks and make everything worse at the end of it all. I mean, it has a role, no doubt it has a role, but you have to be very careful. I have heard nightmare stories of people who are on it like, you know, a year or two. The prescribing doctor forgets that they have an ongoing refill and the person just keeps getting it over and over again. The rule of thumb is 4 to 5 months, generally speaking, max, and then you have to cycle off of it. And then if you cycle off of it, then you should be going on these other things that I just mentioned, especially the non-hydroquinone lighteners as category that I just mentioned, these botanicals. They can actually do the job and suppress melanocytes after the hydroquinone is removed out of the picture. Okay, so you gotta be careful with hydroquinone. It's a common mistake for people to make with this. All right, number 5, and this is a common theme when it comes to skin. Not being consistent with the right stuff. Now, what I mean by that is, I just mentioned to you guys, sun protection, obsessive sun protection, right? I mean, not even taking a day off, a weekend off, period, like going all in on it. Doing that day in and day out, that kind of consistency is necessary to win this battle in the war. Next, you gotta be consistent with these products that we just mentioned, right? I mean, we're talking about retinols, vitamin C's, niacinamide, lighteners, all that other stuff, these botanical-based ones that I just mentioned. That is necessary to be on constantly. So consistency is the key. Now, quite frankly, a huge reason why I developed the trifecta the way I did as a simple 3-step process was I realized that when things are complicated, I mean, I just mentioned like 4 or 5 individual products, now in addition to cleansing, that's like 6 or 7, that you're gonna be using to try to lighten your skin. That's a lot of steps, right? So trifecta, 3 steps, including the cleansing, and then you're done, allows people to be consistent with putting the right stuff on their skin over time. And that consistency at the end of it doesn't matter if you're using trifecta or you putting it together as a part of a different type of routine or regimen, but you have to be consistent with it. Couple that with sun protection, and you will not make the most common mistake, which is starting and stopping, going forward and going backwards, up and down, and looking like, quite honestly, it's like frustrating, right? You start to see some improvements and all of a sudden those improvements are gone. And that is emotionally very wearing. If you can start getting used to the changes in your skin, improving month after month, year after year, you're gonna be in a much better psychological space and much more confident and happy with your overall skin. But just remember, these changes do not happen overnight. They do not happen immediately, no matter what products you use. This is a long-term process, a slow process. Once the process is managed and you've got some suppression going on, you're gonna start to see the big improvements that'll continue to stick with you. All right, folks, I really, really hope you found those 5 common mistakes with melasma very interesting. Do me a favor, send this along to some friends and family. Let's get the word out. Let's help people, you know, who are having tons of confusion and misconceptions with this particular issue, get some clarity and get some direction. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Lots of skin school stuff, lots of stuff on surgical rejuvenation on this channel. If you have some questions or comments, drop them below. And if you like the video, hit like. All right, folks, talk to you later. Thanks so much. Till next time.